Captain David Harrison had been protecting the royal family for 8 years, and in all that time, he had never once broken protocol. His record was spotless, his discipline unwavering, and his loyalty absolute. At 34, he was one of the youngest officers to achieve his rank in the Queen's Guard, testament to his dedication and skill. The autumn morning started like any other at Windsor Castle. Captain Harrison inspected his men as they prepared for their duties, ensuring every button was polished, every crease sharp, and every weapon properly maintained. The royal family was in residence, which meant heightened security and absolute precision in all ceremonial duties. What Captain Harrison didn't know was that today would test every lesson he had learned about maintaining professional distance. From those he protected, the morning briefing had been routine, standard security protocols, weather considerations, and a note that the youngest members of the royal family would be spending time in the gardens as Harrison took his position. Near the castle's main entrance, he noticed unusual activity in the east wing. Through the tall windows, he could see movement in what he knew to be the family's private quarters. It was rare to catch glimpses of the royals during their personal time, and Harrison quickly averted his gaze, focusing on the horizon as he had been trained. But then he heard something that made his heart skip, the sound of a child crying. Not the typical tantrum of a frustrated youngster, but the deep, heartbroken sobs of genuine distress. Training told him to ignore it, to maintain his post, and let the household staff handle whatever domestic issue had arisen. However, the crying continued, growing more intense and desperate. Harrison found himself unconsciously leaning toward the sound, his paternal instincts warring with his professional obligations. He had a daughter of his own, and the sound of any child in distress triggered something primal in him. Through the window, Harrison caught a glimpse of movement. A small figure in a blue dress was sitting alone on a window seat, her face buried in her hands. It was Princess Charlotte, and she was clearly in considerable emotional pain. Harrison had seen her many times during formal events, always perfectly composed and delightfully charming, but this was different. The crying intensified, echoing through the quiet morning air. Harrison glanced around, looking for any sign of a nanny, governess, or family member who might comfort the distressed child. But the corridors visible to him appeared empty, and Charlotte remained alone in her sorrow. Harrison's mind raced. His orders were clear: maintain his post, do not interact with the royal family except in emergency situations, and never compromise security protocols. But every instinct he possessed as a father and protector was screaming at him to help this child who was clearly suffering. The sound of Charlotte's crying began to draw attention from other staff members, but they seemed hesitant to approach. Harrison realized that sometimes the rigid protocols that kept the royal family safe could also isolate them in moments when they most needed human comfort. As he stood there, torn between duty and compassion, Harrison remembered something his own daughter had told him just the week before. "Daddy, sometimes being brave means breaking the rules to help someone who needs you." At the time, he had gently corrected her, explaining the importance of following rules. Now, her innocent wisdom seemed prophetic. The crying reached a crescendo, and Harrison made a decision that would change how he understood his role as a protector. Sometimes he realized protecting someone meant more than just standing guard against external threats. Captain Harrison broke every protocol he had ever learned. He stepped away from his post and quietly entered the castle through a side entrance, his heart pounding with the weight of his decision. His footsteps echoed softly on the marble floors. As he made his way toward the source of Charlotte's distress, when he reached the doorway of the morning room, he paused. Princess Charlotte, no more than 7 years old, was curled up on the window seat, clutching a stuffed animal to her chest. Her face was red and streaked with tears, and her small shoulders shook with each sob. "Your Royal Highness," Harrison said gently, announcing his presence. Charlotte looked up, startled to see the tall guard in his formal uniform standing in the doorway. "I'm sorry for the noise," Charlotte said through her tears, trying to compose herself in the way she had been taught. "I didn't mean to disturb anyone." Harrison's heart broke at her instinctive apology. Here was a child in pain, apologizing for expressing her emotions. He took a careful step into the room, his training warring with his human instincts. "You haven't disturbed anyone, Your Highness, but I noticed you seemed upset. Is everything all right?" Harrison asked, his voice gentle and warm. So different from the formal tone he usually used when addressing the royal family. Charlotte's composure crumbled again. "My hamster died," she whispered, fresh tears streaming down her cheeks. "Nibbles was sick, and this morning when I went to check on him, he wasn't moving anymore." Harrison felt his chest tighten. He remembered his own daughter's devastation when their family cat had passed away. The grief of a child losing their first pet was a pain unlike any other pure. Overwhelming and completely consuming. Without thinking about protocol or consequences, Harrison crossed the room and knelt down beside the window seat, bringing himself to Charlotte's eye level. "I'm so very sorry about Nibbles," he said. "Losing a pet is one of the hardest things anyone can go through." Charlotte looked at him with surprise. She had never had a guard speak to her like this, not as a duty or formality, but as one human being comforting another. "Everyone keeps telling me it's just a hamster and that I can get another one. But Nibbles was special. He knew me." Harrison nodded seriously. Of course he was special. Every pet is unique, and the love we have for them is real and important. It doesn't matter if it was a hamster or a horse. When we love something, losing it hurts. For the first time since he had entered the room, Charlotte's crying began to subside. She looked at this kind guard who understood her pain in a way the adults around her hadn't. "Did you ever lose a pet?" she asked quietly. Harrison smiled sadly. "I did. When I was about your age, I had a dog named Rex. He was my best friend. And when he died, I thought my heart would never stop hurting." "Does it ever stop hurting?" Charlotte asked, her voice small and hopeful. "The sadness gets easier to carry," Harrison replied honestly, "but the love never goes away. That's the wonderful thing about loving something. Even when they're gone, the love stays with us forever." Charlotte wiped her eyes and looked at Captain Harrison with a mixture of curiosity and gratitude. "What was Rex like?" she asked, settling back against the window cushions. Harrison's professional mask had completely dropped away. He was no longer a guard speaking to royalty. He was simply an adult helping a child through grief. "Rex was a golden retriever with the softest ears you could imagine. He followed me everywhere, even to school sometimes, which got me in trouble more than once." A small smile appeared on Charlotte's tear-stained face. "Nibbles used to hide in my pocket during lessons. My governess would hear scratching sounds and know he was there, but she pretended not to notice." "That sounds like Nibbles was very clever," Harrison said. "And it sounds like your governess cared about making you happy." Charlotte nodded. She said pets teach us about responsibility and love. But she didn't tell me they would teach me about sadness too. Harrison was struck by the wisdom in her young observation. "That's the thing about love, Your Highness. The bigger we love, the bigger we hurt when we lose what we love. But that doesn't mean we should love less. It means the love was real and important." As they talked, neither of them noticed the figure standing quietly in the hallway outside. The morning room. Prince William had been looking for Charlotte, worried about her absence from breakfast. He had heard voices and come to investigate, only to discover this unexpected scene. William watched in amazement as one of his most professional guards sat on the floor beside his daughter, speaking to her with genuine warmth and understanding. He could see that Charlotte's tears had stopped, and that some of the tension had left her small shoulders. "My daddy says that when someone we love dies, they go to heaven," Charlotte continued. "Do you think animals go to heaven too?" Harrison paused, aware that he was venturing into territory that could be sensitive for the royal family, given their position in the Church of England. But Charlotte's need for comfort outweighed his concerns about overstepping. "I think," Harrison said carefully, "that anything capable of giving and receiving love must go somewhere beautiful when they die, whether we call it heaven or something. Else, I believe Nibbles is safe and happy, and that somewhere he remembers how much you loved him." Charlotte's eyes filled with tears again. They were different tears now. Not the desperate sobs of earlier, but the gentle tears of someone finding comfort in difficult truths. "Can I tell you a secret?" Charlotte whispered, glancing toward the door to make sure no one else was listening. Harrison nodded solemnly. Of course, sometimes I get scared that people only pretend to like me because I'm a princess. But Nibbles liked me just because I was Charlotte. He didn't care about crowns or titles or any of that. Harrison felt his heart break for this little girl who, despite her privileged position, struggled with the same fears of authenticity that many children faced. Charlotte, he said, using her name without the royal title for the first time. Anyone who gets to know the real you, the girl who loved her hamster so much it made her cry, the girl who sneaks pets into her lessons, anyone who meets that Charlotte will love her for exactly who she is. Prince William stepped quietly into the room, and both Harrison and Charlotte looked up in surprise. Harrison immediately began to rise, his face flushing with the realization that he had completely abandoned his post and protocol. "Sir, I apologize," Harrison began, but William held up a hand to stop him. "Don't apologize," William said softly, his eyes moving between the guard and his daughter. "I've been listening, and I think this is exactly what Charlotte needed." Charlotte looked between her father and Captain Harrison, suddenly worried that she had gotten the kind guard in trouble. "Daddy, he was just helping me because I was sad about Nibbles." William sat down on the window seat beside Charlotte, pulling her into a gentle hug. "I know, sweetheart, and I'm grateful he did." He looked directly at Harrison. "Sometimes the best protection we can offer isn't standing at attention, it's knowing when to break the rules for the right reasons." Harrison remained standing, still, uncertain about the unprecedented situation he found himself in. "Sir, I abandoned my post. There's no excuse for that." "You didn't abandon your post," William replied. "You just redefined what protection means. My daughter was in distress, and you helped her? That seems like the essence of protection to me." Charlotte wiped her nose with the back of her hand. "Daddy, Captain Harrison told me about his dog Rex, and he said that loving something so much it hurts when you lose it means the love was real." William's expression softened as he looked at Harrison with new understanding. "Did he? That's very wise advice. He also said that anyone who gets to know the real me will love me for who I am, not because I'm a princess," Charlotte added. William felt his own eyes moisten. His daughter's fears about authentic relationships were something he had struggled with his entire life, and hearing that someone had addressed them so thoughtfully moved him deeply. "Your Highness," Harrison said to William, "I want you to know that your daughter is remarkable. Not because of her title, but because of her kindness and her capacity to love deeply. Nibbles was lucky to have her." Charlotte beamed at the praise, and William could see that Harrison's words had accomplished something that royal protocol never could. They had made his daughter feel valued as a person, not as a position. "Captain Harrison," William said formally, "I'm going to ask you to continue breaking protocol today. Would you join us for a small ceremony?" Harrison looked puzzled. "A ceremony, sir?" William stood up and offered his hand to Charlotte. "We're going to bury Nibbles properly in the garden. Every beloved pet deserves a funeral. Every child who loses their first pet deserves to have their grief acknowledged and honored." Charlotte's face lit up with the first genuine smile Harrison had seen from her that morning. "Really, Daddy? We can have a funeral for Nibbles?" "Absolutely," William replied. "And I think Captain Harrison would be an honored guest, given that he understood the importance of your loss when others didn't." Harrison felt overwhelmed by the unexpected invitation. In his years of service, he had attended state funerals, ceremonial events, and formal occasions, but he had never been invited to participate in something so personal and meaningful. "I would be honored, sir," Harrison replied, his voice thick with emotion. "Truly honored." The small procession that made its way to the castle's private garden was unlike any ceremonial event in royal history. Prince William carried a small wooden box containing Nibbles, while Charlotte walked beside him, still clutching her stuffed animal. Captain Harrison followed slightly behind, carrying a small shovel from the gardener's shed. Other members of the royal protection team watched in amazement as their captain participated in what could only be described as a pet funeral. Word had spread quietly among the staff. Several had gathered at respectful distances, moved by the unprecedented display of humanity from the usually formal prince and the stoic guard. Charlotte had chosen a spot beneath a large oak tree where she and Nibbles used to sit during outdoor lessons. He liked it here because he could see the whole garden, she explained to Harrison as they approached the location. Prince. William knelt down and began digging a small hole while Charlotte arranged some of her favorite flowers around the area. Harrison watched, struck by the sight of a future king performing this humble task for his daughter's emotional well-being. "Do you like to say something about Nibbles?" William asked Charlotte when the hole was ready. Charlotte nodded solemnly and cleared her throat. Nibbles was the best hamster in the world. He was soft and warm, and he made me feel less lonely when everyone was busy with important things. He never cared that I was a princess. He just wanted me to give him treats and talk to him about my day. Her voice grew stronger as she continued. Captain Harrison told me that the love we have for our pets stays with us forever, even when they're gone. So even though Nibbles isn't here anymore, I'm going to remember him every day. William placed the wooden box gently in the ground and looked at Harrison. Captain, would you like to share any words? Harrison stepped forward, deeply moved by being included in this intimate family moment. I think Nibbles taught us all something important today. He taught us that love doesn't care about titles or positions. Love is simple and pure and honest. And Charlotte's love for Nibbles was all of those things. He paused, looking at the little girl who had taught him so much about compassion. One morning, I also think Nibbles would want Charlotte to know that it's okay to be sad when we lose someone we love. Sadness is just love with nowhere to go, and that's nothing to be ashamed of. Charlotte reached over and took Harrison's hand, a gesture so natural and trusting that it brought tears to William's eyes. Here was his daughter, connecting with another human being in a moment of shared understanding and grief. Thank you for helping me today, Charlotte said to Harrison. You're not just a guard anymore, you're my friend. Harrison squeezed her small hand gently. It's been my honor, Charlotte. And Nibbles was lucky to have a friend like you. As they covered the small grave with earth and arranged the flowers Charlotte had picked, other members of the royal family began to appear. Kate arrived with Prince George and Princess Louis, having heard about the impromptu ceremony. The Queen herself made an appearance, walking slowly but purposefully toward the small gathering. Harrison felt panic rise in his chest, as he realized he was about to face his ultimate superior while completely out of uniform protocol. But the Queen simply nodded to him respectfully and placed a single white rose on Nibbles' grave. Every creature deserves to be mourned, she said simply, and every child deserves to have their grief honored. The Queen's presence transformed the small gathering into something even more extraordinary. Here was the monarch herself, acknowledging the importance of a child's grief and the humanity of those who serve her family. Harrison stood at attention, instinctively, but the Queen gestured for him to remain at ease. Captain Harrison, she said in her measured, familiar voice, I understand you provided comfort to my great-granddaughter in her time of need. Harrison's mouth went dry. Yes, Your Majesty. I realize I abandoned my post and broke protocol. You did exactly what a good man should do, the Queen interrupted gently. Protocol serves us, Captain, not the other way around. When a child is suffering, the only appropriate response is compassion. Charlotte, emboldened by her great-grandmother's presence, stepped forward. Granny, Captain Harrison told me that love stays with us forever, even when someone dies. He helped me understand that being sad about Nibbles means I loved him very much. The Queen's expression softened as she looked down at Charlotte. Captain, Harrison is quite right, my dear. The depth of our sorrow often reflects the depth of our love. Both are precious gifts. She turned back to Harrison, studying his face with the keen perception that had served her through decades of reading people. Tell me, Captain, do you have children of your own? A daughter? Emily. She's 8 years old. And if Emily were in distress, would you expect her protectors to maintain their distance out of protocol? Harrison understood immediately. No, Your Majesty. I would hope they would show her the same kindness you've allowed me to show, Princess. Charlotte. The Queen nodded approvingly. Then you understand why what happened here today was not a breach of duty, but a fulfillment of it. Our first duty is always to protect what matters most, and sometimes what matters most is a child's belief that the world contains kindness. Prince William stepped forward, placing his hand on Harrison's shoulder. "Your Majesty, I'd like to recommend Captain Harrison for commendation. His actions today showed exceptional judgment and humanity." Harrison looked shocked. "That's not necessary. It's entirely necessary," William replied firmly. "You taught my daughter that her feelings matter, that her grief is valid, and that there are good people in the world who will break rules to help someone in pain. Those are lessons worth more than any ceremonial duty." Charlotte tugged on Harrison's uniform jacket. "Will you still be my guard?" she asked, suddenly worried that the day's events might mean he would be reassigned. Harrison knelt down to her. "Level 1 final time. I'll always be here to protect you, Charlotte. And now I know that protection means more than just watching for danger. It means watching for moments when you need a friend." The Queen observed this exchange with satisfaction. In her long reign, she had witnessed countless displays of duty, honor, and service. But moments of genuine human connection, especially those that bridged the gap between the royal family and those who served them, were precious and rare. "Captain Harrison," the Queen said, "I'm creating a new tradition. Now on, all members of the Royal Protection Team will receive training not just in security protocols, but in recognizing when those they protect need human comfort rather than professional distance." Harrison stood, overwhelmed by the magnitude of what had grown from his simple decision to comfort a crying child. "Your Majesty, I'm honored beyond words." As the family began to disperse, each member stopped to thank Harrison personally. "Prince." George shook his hand solemnly. Princess Louis gave him a shy wave. Cade squeezed his arm warmly. Charlotte was the last to leave. She ran back to Harrison and hugged him tightly around the waist. "Thank you for helping me understand about nibbles," she whispered. "And thank you for being brave enough to break the rules when someone needed help." Harrison watched as the royal family walked back toward the castle, knowing that his understanding of service had been fundamentally changed. He had learned that true protection sometimes meant setting aside the armor of protocol to offer the warmth of human connection. As he returned to his duties, Harrison carried with him the memory of a morning when duty and compassion had merged into something beautiful. And when a little girl's grief had taught him that the greatest honor and service comes not from perfect protocol, but from perfect humanity.